If I asked you who the key antagonist was in Dexter Season 3, you'd probably say Miguel, and although this isn't wrong, it technically isn't right. Season 3 is interesting because just like Season 2, we got two antagonists, Miguel Prado and George King, but you know him better as the Skinner. In a show where the villains are memorable despite being good or bad, it's strange how easy it is to forget the Skinner. So why is that? In today's video, I wanted to discuss and share my thoughts on why I think George is the one Dexter villain everyone forgot. We first meet King in episode 3 of the 3rd season, The Lion Sleeps Tonight. It's reported that another Freebo victim has been found at the park with some of his skin sliced off, matching our killer's MO. We know that Freebo has already been taken out by Dex. So who is the Skinner? At the crime scene, we meet a tree trimmer that reported the body, George Washington King. Deb questions him and he admits that another tree trimmer, Mario Estraga, found the victim. Later, the police find evidence that Freebo fled town. This is important because, you guessed it, King is the Skinner and he's looking for Freebo. They were criminal associates and Freebo owed King a large sum of money. Feeling disrespected, King follows Deb as she questioned Freebo's associates around town. Once she's finished with them, King's work can start to begin. Later in the season, King is brought to the station and is questioned, but puts suspicion onto Mario. King tells the detectives that Mario has anger issues and once killed a man. This soon backfires when Mario is questioned, and when he learns King is talking to the police, he's shook. Soon after, King captures Anton Briggs, Deb's CI, as the police made it look like he knew the location of Freebo as bait. While King tortures Anton, we learn he doesn't even care about the money Freebo owes him. This is about respect. Afterwards, King is again taken to the station for questioning and remains calm. We learn he was in the army back in his country, and this is where his belief in respect stems from. With the first round of questioning getting nowhere, Deb switches her approach, and instead of being respectful, she disrespects King by getting physical. Still not having anything on King, the police are relying on Miguel Prado for help. Since Miguel was butthurt for Dexter digging up the body of Ellen Wolf, he lets King walk as a part of his plan. Luckily, Deb gets information out of a scared Mario and he reveals the location where King is most likely torturing Anton. Deb and Quinn get to Anton right on time before King can finish his work, and now the Skinner is on the run. At the end of the entertaining back and forth between Dexter and Miguel, Mr. Prado sets Mr. King on Mr. Morgan, stating he's the one man that knows where Freebo is. In the season finale, King captures Dexter, and this is the first and final time they interact in the entire season. On the Skinner's table, Dexter tells King that he killed Freebo and Miguel used him. George still doesn't believe Dex, but that's because he's choosing not to. The truth is, King is a true monster that enjoys skinning people. Dexter just sees through his flimsy excuses. Dex eventually breaks free and puts an end to King once and for all. Okay, now that I've refreshed your memory, why was all of this so easy to forget? Well, to put it simply, King was Deb's antagonist, not Dexter's. In season 3, for the first time, Deb acts as our deuteragonist and is the protagonist of the Skinner storyline. Even though Dex does chip in from time to time to help with the case, he's too busy to focus on King. This works because our boy's hands are pretty full. He's created a killer that won't follow his code, he's getting married, and is about to have a baby. While at this point in the show, Dex doesn't do too badly balancing both his worlds, handling King would have been far too much to juggle. Knowing how predictable the Dexter formula becomes after this season, I actually like having two villains. For one, it shows us that Deb is a pretty good detective. Prior to this case, she's always relied heavily on her brother's weird instincts, so I found it refreshing to see her fly solo on this one. When you think about it, Miami Metro sucks. They rarely catch the bad guys, and when they're close, we know who catches them. Despite this still being the case, Deb has the Skinner banged to rights. She's able to realize the Skinner's known victims had some type of connection to tree trimming, which is how he stalks them. She finds the location where Anton is being held and ultimately saves him. Deb's instincts are sharper than she thinks, and she proves she is a great cop in her own right. When the police had King in questioning and he wouldn't budge, Deb still had a feeling he was the guy. She was right. I also love how Deb thinks she was the one who killed the Skinner in the end and finally put a stop to him. With my praises out the way, the biggest drawback to this decision is the lack of interactions we get between Dexter and King. Like I mentioned earlier, these two only meet once in the finale of the season. Normally what makes the villains of Dexter so interesting is the constant back and forth between them and Dex. Every other villain has this sort of dynamic with Dexter, where you can either relate to them or having to kill them becomes personal. When talking about the Skinner, Dexter was forced to take him out, rather than needing or wanting to. This is a nice change for once, but lacks memorability, simply because they barely share the screen together. When they do finally have their showdown, it doesn't really feel like Mr. King is the final boss. Even on my first watch of season 3, I felt like Miguel's end should have been a part of the final episode instead of the Skinner's end. We'll get into that in a second, but Dexter taking out the Skinner doesn't really make us feel anything. I'm sure I wasn't the only one thinking, will he make it to the wedding on time, instead of will he make out of this one this time? Maybe that's because although the Skinner is a brutal villain, he doesn't feel threatening, at least not a threat to Dex. Without even having a season to focus on King, Dexter easily sees through his facade. It may seem like respect and money is his priority, but King enjoys his ritual. I think we might have remembered King better if he was just arrested in the episode before the finale. Maybe that's a stretch, but I feel like doubling down on the fact that King is Deb's villain, not Dexter's, would do him more justice. When Dexter is faced with King, he feels more like a henchman sent by Miguel, a last effort to take out Dex even after the game over screen. With all said and done, we just needed more screen time between the two. He wasn't any match for Dex, and maybe he wouldn't have been, even with a cat and mouse game, but I'm certain it would have helped. The main reason we all know George wasn't remembered was because Miguel overshadows him. Miguel works so well because for the first time Dexter thinks he actually has a real friend, with Ghost Harry constantly warning Dex to keep Miguel at arm's length, but Dex having hope in his new friend. It shows us how badly he wants a connection, and he gets punished for it. Not only does Miguel take advantage of Dexter, but he takes out an innocent woman. Understanding that Dex made a mistake, he knows he has to stop Miguel one way or another. This leads to one of the most entertaining back and forths in the entire show.
The last person you want to fuck with, because I will fuck you back in ways you never even imagined.
People talk about how funny Masuka is, but Miguel is hilarious, ironically and unironically. A great friendship, plus a great rivalry, plus a great ending. Why wasn't this in the finale? Miguel Prado was too big of a character to not be the final kill, and I just think the Skinner suffers because of it. King automatically has problems with Dex because he's told he knows where Freebo is, but when they're face to face, he just feels like he's doing Miguel's dirty work. Miguel was the bigger and better villain of the season. He just should have been the final kill before the ending. I honestly think we should have just seen more of King. I like the brutality in his methods and his cover life as a tree trimmer, but that's all we get. He isn't really the most interesting villain, as his whole gimmick is about respect and chasing Freebo. I wouldn't call him boring, but I could easily think of more interesting villains. King is underwhelming and barely fights Dexter. He is manhandled in seconds and clearly stood no chance. He did have the edge on Dex and managed to capture him, but this whole scene was showing how Dexter wanted to be in Harrison's life. Even Dex forgiving Ghost Harry overshadowed the Skinner's presence. Maybe that's harsh, but in my opinion, that's what it felt like. Getting more of King would have been nice. I felt like he really shined when he was torturing Anton. It showed how ruthless he was and the savagery in his methods. With every other victim, we don't even see how it goes down, since the first half of the season is about who's the killer this time. He's not the main villain of the season, so I guess flashbacks wouldn't work, but he doesn't even talk about his past at all. I'm sure you get my point. We just needed more than what we got of King. Way more. The idea of having two antagonists is genius, but it's hard to remember one villain when they're outshined by the other. And although King acts as Deb's antagonist, he doesn't work as Dexter's due to their limited screen time together. The concept of the Skinner is cool, but he needed more time to be interesting. Despite the success of season 3, the writers don't attempt this idea again, but I still wouldn't say George was the reason why. After all, how can you realize your character is forgotten when you don't even remember them?